Yes. And if you're new to this, I never know, there's one disadvantage from my point of view of not teaching this face to face, because if I was at the Buddhist Society tonight, I'd say, is there anybody here who's new to the class or new to meditation? And I can't really do that now because I can't. I can't manage the technology. So I've got to assume that I'm just kind of looking around things. I recognize a few faces, a few names. Thanks for coming back. But there are plenty of people I can't see. I'm going to assume that probably the majority of us here have been on this scene for quite a while, but equally there's probably several people here for whom this is either the first time they've been to this class or they're pretty new to any sort of meditation. So the usual format is I'll give a few hints in the first session, half an hour or whatever we want to call it, and then I usually try and say something helpful in the break. If nothing else, it's a break where we can, I was going to say relax, but meditation is a fairly relaxing experience. Just sort of shuffle around or have a sip of water or something, and then sit for the second bit, which I try to encourage. I try to encourage myself to be a bit quieter, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions and discussion. And I should say at the outset that Wong Du, the genius behind the scenes who's organizing the technology tonight, he will certainly feed through any chats that people send. Make sure I get any chats that people send, or you can send them directly through to me in the chat box. But also, when we get to questions or discussion, everybody will be unmuted, so feel absolutely free to just to ask a question in the normal way, or make a comment in the normal way. So that's the way things work. And we usually, I've no sort of fixed time here, but we usually end about 8 o'clock. But of course, anybody can go at any time they like, without any.
Colin, you are muted.
Yeah, somehow I was muted. Right. So anyway, some meditation, a period of meditation, and it's interesting. I think it's quite interesting to see if we have any what the grand plan is tonight, if any. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this tonight? Just to be clear about this, and any expectations we might have, and I'll let you into a little sort of secret. But my approach to a period of meditation is, it's whatever, half an hour. We'll talk about half an hour period. It's half an hour's nature study. Half an hour's nature study. It's sort of being a David Attenborough. And a lot of the sort of David Attenborough qualities of watching a beastie or a bug or whatever, quite handy when we're doing mindfulness meditation. This idea of quietness, stability, alertness, that sort of thing. So it's an evening of nature study. Where we're studying actually, the nature of the mind. But you say, well, this is a period of nature study. Or another way, lightening it up a little bit, I often think of meditation, particularly with the Buddhist Society's class on a Thursday night at the movies. You go to the movies, we're going to watch a show. That's interesting. What's the show tonight? What's the show tonight? It's quite interesting just to watch that. And maybe just to remind ourselves that we wouldn't even notice the show if it wasn't for the screen in the background. And then another way of looking at this is a lighter way altogether, perhaps. Ajahn Chah often talked about meditation. Ajahn Chah was this Thai meditation master who influenced a lot of people. he would often talk about meditation as being a holiday of the heart. A holiday, you don't often think of meditation being a holiday. Well, why not? A holiday of the heart when we can just kind of sit back. You don't have any goals, aspirations, or at least nothing pressing that needs to be done before pick a time, 6:30 or 7:30 or 8:00. Just on holiday. Take it easy. And these are, I personally, you may be quite different, but personally, I find these little ideas of it's nature study. How interesting. Or I'm going to the movies. What's on at the movies? Or, wow, I've closed the door. The pressures of the day are behind me. It's a holiday of the heart. Anyway, these are little suggestions which may or may not be helpful. It's billed as being, this class is being billed as being mindfulness practice, core Buddhist practice. That sounds incredibly serious, doesn't it? Well, don't take it too seriously. I mean, do it, but that serious attitude, it takes effort. It takes commitment. But I hope nobody is going to try too hard tonight to do, I couldn't even tell you, but don't try too hard. Sit back. It's nature study. And we might be studying the nature of the mind which wants to achieve something, you see. That would be part of the nature study. And then if we let go of that, we might enjoy a holiday of the heart. We never know. So, nature study, set the body up, set the camera up, as it were. Right? The posture helps. Any posture will do. Please understand that. Don't get hung up on posture. But a stable posture, we're observing a bird in the tree. If we move around, the bird's going to take off. So a stable posture. And a stable posture needs to be a reasonably comfortable posture, actually. If we're not comfortable, we're going to jiggle around, fidget. Stable posture. But mindfulness is all about knowing what's going on, to notice things. So we need to be an alert posture, alert, relaxed posture. And it's a balancing act. Not too tense, not too sloppy. And for most of us, frankly, it would be quite okay if we thought, wow, I can relax, actually. I want to go to sleep. Please don't go to sleep unless you're very tired. But relax. Okay. And I find it quite helpful just to bring attention to the body and see where I'm not relaxing, actually. And where I'm not kind of alert. If I'm kind of slumping. I don't want to do that. So I've set myself on a chair on quite a high cushion because I'm quite tall myself. Hips above the knees. These are good kind of little hints that I try and take. Park your hand somewhere. Reasonably upright, but comfortable. Eyes open or half open, it really doesn't matter. I usually close my eyes because I'm trying to turn the attention, inwards. But if anybody wants to look at something, we've got that lovely Buddha image on the screen. It would be a lot worse way of spending the time just to contemplate that beautiful Buddha image. There's the Buddha sitting there, enlightening and touching the earth with that right hand of his. It's an interesting story in itself. But turn the attention inwards, close or half close the eyes, I suggest. How's the body feel? Now, next week, Ajahn Barry will be leading the class, and he usually spends the first session just scanning the body from soles of the feet to the top of the head, top of the head to the soles of the feet, noticing sensations. And that's a great mindfulness practice. I like to do when I sit myself these days. I do a very quick version of it. Where are the strongest physical sensations? And I'm sitting on something, so I can't miss that feeling of sitting. Backside on cushion or chair or whatever we're on. If we're on the floor, lower legs, or shins and feet touching the floor. And there's the feeling of sitting, and I'm breathing, and I notice the breath first of all in the belly, the waistband, the pressure of the belly, up and down, in and out, the breath goes. Hands, I've just parked my hands somewhere. Probably they're touching, maybe touching each other, might be one hand on the other, but wherever we put our hands, they're in contact with something. Hands are very sensitive, so notice feelings in the hands. Hands are very, very sensitive. And actually, our hands are ideally adapted to hang on to things. So there could be tension in the hands. And just notice that. And we don't have to be tense in the hands. We don't have to be. And you notice the rhythm of the breath. Maybe, a bit of anxiety there, perhaps. Just notice that. It's not a fault or anything like that. But we breathe out a bit. Relax. Shoulders, any tension in the shoulders. You can ease the shoulders. Get comfortable. So these are parts of the body where I notice quite a bit of physical sensation. Usually not good, not bad, nothing special. So feet and legs, hips, backside, belly, hands, shoulders. But there's a massive sensation coming in through the body, isn't there? Massive feelings. The breath itself, which is a meditation object we often use. There's the belly, notice the belly moving around the nostrils, on the lips, anywhere. Good idea just to find out as a reference point where we might use it tonight, if we use that as our meditation object. Other sensations. If we've closed our eyes, sensations around the eyes and the eyelids touching. Lips are touching, probably. Our tongue is touching something, and the saliva in the mouth. We notice that. Jaw doesn't have to be clenched tight, Relax. If we want to. Then there's a sensation of the room on the skin of the face. Warmth, perhaps. Any sensations in the scalp? A lovely practice is being aware of sensations on the very tippy top of the head, the crown of the head. And often there's nothing there. So isn't it interesting to be aware of the feeling of nothing? You're not ignoring it, or just, nothing. Wow. So the shoulders and the arms, down to the hands touching something, up the arms again, trunk of the body, pressure of, not pressure, the movement of the lungs, chest, rib cage, beat of the heart, pick that up, down to the belly again, to the hips. How's the back? Across the scapula at the back, down the spine. Any discomfort? Just be aware of it. Small on the back. We're getting down to the backside, feeling of sitting, feelings in the hips, pelvis, hips, down the legs, How are the knees tonight? In terms of sensation, you know, we've all got opinions about our knees. As many of us have. But just how do they feel right now? Shins and ankles and feet. There you go. So we're aware of, if we've learnt nothing else, we're aware of the massive sensations that are coming into us just from our body. We're experiencing the body as just one big ping, 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 ping of different sorts of feelings. That's interesting. You know, sometimes they talk about this practice of mindfulness as being insight practice. Well, there's a bit of insight there. Experience of massive sensations in the body. Why do we, at any moment, why do we pay attention to one rather than another? Well, don't get trapped in thinking about that. But that's, okay, how's the mood tonight? How's the mood? How's the mind? And just check it out. Sunny, gloomy, happy, sad, hyperactive, dull. That's nature, you see. It's there for, there are causes and conditions which make the mood the way it is. And in nature, and we might want to change that. That's another interesting ambition, desire. Well, we could, so just study that. Maybe just studying the tone of the mind, the activity of the mind. You know, it's like it's stepping back from it, actually, just in itself. Oh, it's like this. You know, that crucial, I think it appears in the online ad for this class, mindfulness. It's like this. It's like this. The body's like this. The mind is like this. Thinking is like this. Nature study. That's what one of the movies tonight. And when we notice that, we step back from it a bit. And maybe we enjoy a holiday of the heart. Meditation object can give a bit of stability to the practice. That's why a lot of us use the breath. The ordinary breath, not controlling the breath. We're just tuning into a particular sensation, another feeling. The in-breath, the out-breath. On the nostrils, for example, or on the rise and fall of the abdomen, for example. Feeling of the ordinary breath. We don't have to do a thing about it, except be aware of it. And it's not like you got to concentrate on it. Just be aware of it. Because the mind will wander. The attention will wander. And that's part of our nature too. For the monkey mind to go exploring, because, you know, the monkey mind likes interesting things, even if some of the interesting things are actually rather unpleasant. So this practice is being aware of what the mind is up to, noticing that. Fascinating, isn't it? The mind is a wonderful thing. We can pay attention to what the attention is doing. You know, when I say, oh, the attention has wandered, I've attended to that wandering attention. And when we notice what the mind is up to, that's not a fault. You don't make any judgment about it. But the essence of this practice of mindfulness, the two words in my book are notice and then let go. So when we notice what the mind is doing, we then have a choice, you see. We come off autopilot, if we want to, and redirect the attention back to the meditation object. Maybe the breath, it may be a mantra, it may be beads, it may be sensations in the body. Doesn't matter. You know, there's a little anchor we can turn the attention to stop the mind from bobbing, the attention from bobbing off too far. A reference point. Somewhere where we can go for refuge, if we want to. And so I'd suggest, because I usually use the rhythm of the breath as my meditation object, or this thing called the sound of silence, whatever that is. We can talk about that at the end. So the practice is just to sit here. The body's like this. The mind is thinking and remembering is like that too. And we're just watching this. We're not really engaging in it. We're just watching it. We're at the movies. It's nature study. When the mind wanders, notice that. Let go back to the breath. Something triggers off an emotion. We notice that. We let go, point the attention back to the breath. That's it. That's it. And we're not screwing we're not locking onto the breath. That may happen automatically, by the way. When we get kind of deeply into this and everything gets pretty quiet, because the breath is really so tranquilizing, you just fall into tranquility. But it's not very tranquil when I'm nailing my attention to the breath. That's called getting a headache. Very foolish. Breathing in, breathing out. I'm taking this very compassionate attitude to what we're doing. It's nature study. And we're making just enough effort to follow each individual in-breath, each individual out-breath. Rather obviously, an in-breath begins, and then it ends. There's a gap, and out-breath begins, and it ends, and there's a gap, and in-breath again. And just tune into that rhythm, breathing in and out. And maybe following an in-breath all the way through, in fact. From the moment there's that impulse to breathe in, following the in-breath so it comes to a full stop, turns round, out-breath begins. There we go. Stops, ends. In-breath. No control, just observation. And this can be very peaceful. But it's quite difficult, isn't it? Because it's not really stimulating at all. And the monkey mind likes stimulus. So when we sort of think of something, or hear a sound, or there's a bit of a feeling of something in the body, the attention will wander. And it's like, there goes the monkey mind again. All right, notice that. Don't beat ourselves up. That's foolish. We just notice where the attention has wandered. And then the real effort is to let go, not to get trapped in all that proliferating thinking and whatnot. Don't have to do that. Just to notice, thinking, imagining, fantasizing, planning, trivia, call it anything you like, back to the breath. It's the letting go which is the difficult bit, the non-attachment which is so difficult. It's the mental relaxation which is so difficult. And that's what we're learning to do tonight in this period of nature study. Maybe need to check out the body occasionally. Haven't tensed up, have we? If we have, just back off, take it easy, relax. Have we started nodding off? Okay, it's been a hard day. Put a bit of effort into holding the body upright. Sit with the eyes open, for example. Do please take this opportunity to wriggle, have a sip of water, stretch, get up. So I was asked a little while ago, because I'm always looking for kind of themes and things to think about in these sessions. And somebody said, hey, what's all this dependent origination about? A crucial bit of Buddhist Dharma. What's it all about? What's it got to do with meditation? What's it got to do with what we get up to in our daily life? And that is a great topic. I'm really grateful for somebody suggesting that would be a good thing to sort of explore in these sessions. I mean, for me to be whatever it is, for me, it's an essential sort of reference point in my practice. What are we learning from our practice? That's at the end of a period of meditation. I encourage everybody to think, what have I learned? What have I learned tonight? What have I learned from that 10 minutes, last 10 minutes? And what I've learned is what this dependent origination thing kind of is all about. And what it is nature study, or rather, when we, if you like, meditate on it, when we practice mindfulness, what it is learning about why we experience unsatisfactoriness, very broadly defined, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness in our lives, and dependent origination suggests that it's from repeatedly making the same mistakes over and over again, that we're trapped in deep-seated, maybe subconscious habits, and so we operate on autopilot, and that means automatic thinking, automatic emotional responses, automatic behaviors. And if you read dependent origination, it spells all that process out in very, very considerable detail of how we get kind of trapped in automatic responses. And I'll just give you some examples from everyday life, really. I'm terrible at this, but I'm working on it all the time, which is somebody was talking and I think I know what they're going to say. So we just interrupt and complete some on sentence for them. Well, that's very nice, isn't it? But no, it's not. Got to be a bit patient, really, haven't we? But you just notice that automatic response. Or maybe tonight we've sat down on something and we've discovered it's not quite right. It feels not quite right. It's not like we sit on a drawing pin or anything, but it feels not right. And it's like, well, you can wriggle around and do something about it. Or now we get into a story of, well, next time I'll do something about it. We think about how, and then that can all lead to, I can never get this posture right. I'll never be able to meditate in my life. Away we go again, all that sort of stuff. And just notice the way we automatically and emotionally respond to reading about, listening to, watching the news. Wow, and away we go with these automatic responses. And I remember I went to Thailand for this first time, and a friend gave me some durian. I don't know if you've ever eaten durian, but eating durian for the first time, my initial reaction was, that is the most disgusting thing I've ever put in my mouth. I'll never eat it again. And that was my conditioning. That's a very good example. That's my conditioning. Thai people love durian, and I never got to the point of loving durian, but it wasn't as bad as the first time. On the other hand, if when this class ends, I go and have some delicious chocolate ice cream from the freezer, I just want more and more and more. You just notice these habits, and there's no judgment involved in any of this, by the way. This is autopilot. This is habits and habit reinforcement, and that's what dependent origination kind of is all about. So you start off with if you like with our senses. In Buddhism, there are 6 senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, physical sensations, taste, and of course thinking. 6 senses in Buddhism, and that's the way we are, and our programming conditions the way the senses operate. And so when we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, that triggers off all sorts of automatic responses, but deep automatic responses. Feel like positive, negative, push, pull, backing away, or going towards. Deep sensations of just pull and push, as it were. Get away, got to have, or got to get more. And that in turn triggers a cascade, automatically triggers a cascade of emotions and of thinking, desires and attachments and all the thinking that goes around about that. We recognize it, we analyze it, we put labels on it, we develop opinions about things, we obsessively think about it, and our heads run all over the place. And that's automatic. That's what we're learning about in this nature study course we're doing called mindfulness meditation. And I'm definitely not saying that all automatic behavior, all habitual behavior is wrong. Think about driving a car. Thinking about changing, I drive. Think about changing gear. I just do it automatically, and I think I should. I mean, if we sat back and rationally tried to calculate every conceivable action that we had to do, our heads would burst. So I'm not saying that all autopilot activity is wrong, but a lot of it is. A lot of it leads to attachment and aversion and associated behavior of habit reinforcement, and on and on and on. Now, dependent origination spells this out in great detail, sort of in the way I've just described, right? But when it spells it out that way, you can see how you can break out of this, how you can escape from this, and the way to. So it's a linkage system. They talk about the 12 links of dependent origination. Never mind what they are, but it's like, so when we sense things, see, hear, smell, taste, touch, that triggers off deep reactions of positive, of plus and minus, push and pull, positive and negative. That in turn leads us down the path of liking, disliking, hanging on to, pushing away from, thinking about, etc., etc., etc. And to escape, the Buddha in the dependent origination formula says, intercept it as early as you possibly can in that process. Intercept it at source, at the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking stage of things. Just there, if you can, just notice that. And with mindfulness, you can notice it and maybe let go. That's the whole point, notice and let go. So, and I'm going to encourage a particular sort of practice, I think, tonight, which may make very clear what I'm talking about. 2 weeks ago, when I was sitting here and we had this class, somebody asked a question about noting practice. And the question was, what do I think of noting practice? I'll tell you what that means in a moment. Should I do it? Should I not do it? And if I was up to the mark when that question was asked, I hope I said, well, if it helps, do it. If it clutters up with the mind with more noting and it's not necessary, don't do it. Now I want to actually encourage, you can try this noting practice. Now what I mean by that is simply this. And remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to sort of intercept this automatic process of how sensations and thoughts and lead to emotional responses, lead to mental proliferation, all that kind of stuff. Intercepted at source. So we're sitting here tonight and we'll feel things. Just notice feeling, just like that. Get the mind, just make a little mental note, feeling. If we open our eyes, just notice seeing. If you hear a sound, like me saying something, we note hearing, put a label on it, stick a flag on it. Unlikely that we're going to smell anything or taste anything, but the same would apply. And of course, the same thing with thinking. Just note thinking. Or, if it's sort of, if the thinking process goes on a little bit, what is it? It's remembering, it's planning. And we call it that. It's fantasizing. That's fear. That's anxiety. Just label these things and then let go of it. So I'm going to encourage noting, actually. Noting last week's. Noting in this next session. So as I say, when things happen, and they will happen, just note them, put a label on them, and that may help letting go and going back to the breath, rather than this continuous process of one thought, for example, leading to another thought, or a physical sensation leading to, I'm never going to meditate again, or a physical sensation leading me to worry about my health, for example. So this is quite interesting to try that. And so let's do it. We'll sit for about 20 minutes now. And if you like, quite deliberately doing this noting practice. Noting, and it's a well-known method, by the way, that we can try. Now, I should say this to pick up with my response a couple of weeks ago. If, we've been practicing for a bit, and actually the mind, the attention settles down pretty well, there's no need to do it, because we are injecting a bit more into this practice than is necessary. If we can do this, if we can let go and not let the mind run riot without labeling and noting and literally noting, that's good. But in my experience, this can really help. It can really help when there's a sound, we deliberately note hearing. When there's an ache in the body or a soreness in the body, we note feeling. And when a little thought bobs up, we note thinking. Noting, letting go, back to the meditation object. Let's just try that for 20 minutes. So once again, compose the body. Notice hearing. Set the body up. Notice feelings in the body. Be aware of the breath or the sound of silence. And when the mind starts getting busy, just note thinking. Back to the breath. So in a few moments I'll ring the bell. Just notice hearing. And then maybe open your eyes and notice seeing. And notice sensations in the body and the intention to move. So this practice of noting, I find clever because it drives a momentary wedge, behind the raw, seeing, feeling, touching, and any subsequent response. Just a momentary wedge. So, my sort of formula for mindfulness is noticing and letting go. Noticing and letting go. So now with that noting in there, it could be noticing something and then noting it and then letting go. It makes the letting go perhaps you have to try it, a bit easier. Because the alternative is just, you notice it, but it's difficult to let go of it because one thing leads to another thing leads to another thing. And one of the reasons, one of the most, sounds a bit paradoxical, a bit nonsensical, but I found that one of the most interesting things about actually taking this class physically at the Buddhist Society was the noise. 58 Eccleston Square, back of Victoria Station, is not a cave in the Himalayas. It really is not. It's not. I mean, I live on the edge of a village, 20 miles out of London. It's not as quiet as that. Sitting meditation at 7 p.m. at the Buddhist Society on a weekday, it's like all the commuter traffic and ambulances and police cars and all of that. And then depends on the wind direction, but you're under the flight path into Heathrow. It's noisy. And it's like, that's when this kind of practice of just hearing, so useful, because initially it's just like, why do they put the Buddhist Society in one of the noisiest places in London at 7 p.m. The mind just grinds on and on and on like that. But it's like, it's just hearing. So it's great for learning to, let go, just to note that tendency of the mind to move from the sound to chattering on about the sound. The sound of traffic leading to sounds in their head. Just hearing back to the breath. And I mean, that's a a trivial. Well, no, it's not. That's not a trivial example, by the way. But I've just been finishing a novel, actually, which I've been reading. It's about a person who's completely preoccupied with how she appears to other people. So it's this crazy business of she's thinking, what are other people thinking about me? You know. So whenever she sees anybody, her mind spins off into either some sort of comparison, you know, I've got a better one or a worse one than this other person has, or it's like she's judging me for something, or when she used that phrase, was she referring, you know, negative? Anyway, this goes on, and she gets terribly paranoid, mental, very ill indeed. You know, it's like, well, luckily we're not like that, I hope. But you know, it's like, how do we intercept that bad case of, you know, dependent origination? Right, please, if we can unmute everybody, please. Odin, let's unmute. And yeah, I get gallery view now. And if anybody wants to send through some chat, just go for it. If anybody would like to really chat, everybody is unmuted if you want to. Just chat away. While you're sort of thinking about all this sort of stuff, first of all, most importantly, next week it's Ajahn Barry Subhaddo coming to us from Spain. So please log in for Ajahn Barry. Oh, and homework. Oh, this is interesting because I sort of mentioned. I think last time I was we were talking about homework, apropos, relevant to all this habitual stuff, and I just suggested really we should become aware of really quite simple habits. There's absolutely no judgment in this. Things like, which shoe do we put on first? When we take a step forward, do we lead with the left or lead with the right? I mean, that sort of thing. That kind of thing. I mean, and the point about it was clearly there's no, you know, it's not one's right and one's wrong or anything like that at all. It's just noticing how, you know, we're creatures of habit. And the more we do that habit, you know, the more it's embedded into, if you like, who we are, if we want to make it like that. Now, here's an interesting thing that we can try. And this is much more radical and much more crazy. So I thought I'd suggest it just in case you want to have some fun with this. Monks and nuns, one of the sort of austerity practices that the monastics sometimes do is this. So they go around with their alms bowl, and you know, people put food in the alms bowl. And typically, you know, the first stop, you get the rice and the lentils and the veg, and you move down the line, and then you get down the end of the line, and maybe some ice cream or some trifle and some fruit. It's all in your bowl. And then as a practice, they don't do this all the time, but they just get their spoons and mush it all up. They just mush it all up. And some lay people get quite upset. You know, I prepared this delicious whatever it is, and they've just mashed it in with everything else. And that's just to, oh yeah, it's tasting. End of story. Kind of, it's that sort of attitude. I'm not suggesting we should do that, but one fun thing that we can do is, you know, it's like normally when we sit down for a meal. Well, I mean, normally, you know, you have your savory course, your main course before your dessert. Okay, so what happens when we have the dessert first? What happens when we have the dessert, the sweet thing before the savory thing? That's quite interesting, isn't it? Just to see the reaction to that. Anyway, don't cause your partner's life absolute misery by doing this, but it's just a suggestion, an experiment to see these sort of habits and our reactions. It's just interesting. It is nature study. It's nature study. Interesting. Right. Any questions or comments, either by chat or by speech? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Todo.
Hi. Hi. I just wanted to ask, well, I've tried to ask this question before. My noticing turns into commentary which is kind of a thinking. I think even when I notice that I'm already having this mental commentary going on, even that's a sentence. So I'd like to come up with a way of noticing without sort of using mental words, because one word grows into a sentence, and then and I'm sitting here thinking rather than meditating.
Yeah, so, well, you're almost there. I mean, it's like,
it doesn't feel that way.
So notice thinking. So something happens, and you notice it, and then you start thinking after that. So you're almost just notice thinking. I mean, thoughts are terribly seductive, terribly attractive. Why am I thinking, for example? Or I wish I could stop thinking. I wish I didn't do this, right? But just notice that tendency that we're thinking. It's like I'm trying to imagine. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, because So something happens. I start thinking about it. Once I notice thinking, I'm not at that moment thinking the original train of thought. See what I mean? So yeah, exactly. So you find yourself thinking, and you notice thinking. And you're taking one step back from it all the time, you see.
But then is when I think I'm not actually meditating. I'm thinking about the.
I know you're being very mindful. Not when you're thinking, not when there's that train of thought. Then you're off just on autopilot. But if you stop and note thinking, for that moment, you're not locked in this train of thought of thinking. It's clever stuff, and I'm going to just try it. You see, you're within an ace of mastering it, because you notice this habit, right? Or something happens. I don't know what it is, a sound or whatever, and you start thinking about it. So then you notice, and you note the thinking. Note the thinking itself. It's like, you can almost say, I don't like this, by the way, because the word I is going to come into it. I am thinking. But as long as you can then let go of that and bring the attention back to the breath, that's okay. It's just, it's getting a position where one is observing the whole time, including observing the fact that one is thinking. It's like, you're doing fine. Just notice thinking, which is what you've done, you see.
Okay, so it's not practical to aim to notice without actually mentally, with a word, labeling it.
Well, you can put a label on it. Yeah, by all means, you can label it. You can label it thinking. You can label it, I don't know, figuring something out. But stick a flag on it, with a word on it. Worrying, planning, and then let go of it.
Okay. It's the letter.
Okay.
Yeah.
John, down in the right hand on my screen. John Terre, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add to what you were saying, to give to some encouragement, if you detach from being the thinker, but being the awareness and watching the thinking, you can begin to see different types of thinking. Just before, I think, as Colin was pointing out, some of the thinking is it's just daydreaming all over the place, and often we're not aware of that as it's happening, but we suddenly catch ourselves up being daydreaming. That's one type of thinking. But if you can stand back and you've posed a question or something comes up into the space in your mind, you can have a feeling that I'm not the thinking, but I am the awareness, and the awareness is watching the thinking coming up within my awareness. And you can accept the thinking, and quite often it will give you some great insights. And sometimes, certainly I find, is the thinking starts, it picks up a theme, and I'm listening to it as if I'm listening to a documentary on the radio. And when it's finished, it comes to a natural end, and then there's just a cessation of the thinking. But I'm still there with my awareness. I am the awareness. I'm not the thinking. I'll stop there, but I just really supporting what Colin's saying, and maybe to give you some encouragement to thinking is really beneficial at times, as long as it's not the daydreaming and the expectation thinking, etc., etc. As you get to know thinking, you can begin to differentiate between types of thinking and which are really valuable and which are just grabbing your attention and taking you astray.
Thanks, John. I mean, a good example is when we catch ourselves daydreaming. You said it, and just note daydreaming. You know, full stop. Daydreaming. But then we've got to be a bit careful about, you know, another thought will then occur in my little head, which is, I'm not thinking. But that's another thought. You know, the thought, it's not a thought in my head, it's a thought. So you're just forced back and back to being aware, you know, to being aware. That's where this is going, you know, being aware. But I like the idea of, you know, we all daydream. I daydream, you know, we all daydream. You just catch ourselves from doing it. Just catch us, if that's what we, all this is conditional, if that's what we want to do. If we want to spend our lives daydreaming, good luck. You know, but it's like daydreaming, or, you know, noticing anxiety. Not so much, you got to be careful with this. I'm anxious. There's anxiety. That's why I like making it very, very physical. You know, anxiety to me is butterflies in the stomach. So you notice butterflies, you can call it anxiety. And the moment you put a name on it, it sort of disempowers it a bit. I mean, I'm not saying this is just taking a pill, but to me, it's like continual kind of practice. It's like going to the Buddhist Society every Thursday and just learning not to get hung up, frankly, on the noise from coming in from outside. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this? Don't be frightened of thinking now.
There's two other people with hands raised, Colin.
Oh, God. Well, hang
There's
on.
James and Kenny.
Okay, James and
Kenny, I think.
Well, okay, I can't see them, but James.
I'm James.
Oh, hi. See you.
Hi, hello.
James,
I don't know whether this makes sense to other people, but long before I got interested in Buddhism and meditation, I used to watch babies, and it's clear that they're engaged with the world. It's clear that they're doing something, but they're pre-verbal. And I just think, how do they think without words? I can't do that. And actually, I ended up, particularly once I discovered this concept or been faced with it in meditation, I ended up thinking that it helped me to try to hold my thoughts before they became words. That what I thought Todo was describing, which described my experience anyway, is the problem comes at the point that I call it by a word, in my case in English, whatever it might be. And that if I try and have the experience without putting it into words, that seemed to be helpful to me, to the extent I can do this at all anyway.
That's good, and that might be helpful to Todor, you know, rather than get involved in a lot of speech. You just notice the thinking. Although you're absolutely right. I mean, most of us, you know, think. Most of us think verbally. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But it's more like, in a way, you know, going back a step before that, and so something happens. I don't know. The durian hits my taste buds, as it were, before the words follow. It's like, and leave it there. Taste, unpleasant taste. Let it go. You know, it's that sort of thing. But I mean, a good point that you know, words. A continuous flow of words is one, you know, it's like one word leads to another word, sentences lead to paragraphs, and, you know, paragraphs lead to narratives and the story of our lives. So if we can just intercept it with one word, like thinking, like anxiety, like tasting, that's pretty clever. That's quite clever. Oh, now, Colin,
the other person with a question was Kenny, but I think he should put her hand down now, or he or she.
Is Kenny still interested in asking a question or sending it through?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay, my signal, I'm very patchy, which is why I put my hand down. I wanted to ask about the practice of noting, because well, one thing I've done, I had it really effective in stopping the process. I've taken the ing off and taken I away. So I say a thought, because when I was thinking or hearing, it kind of denoted a process for me, which would kind of encourage me to continue doing it rather than trying to let go. But actually, I live in Lewisham, so during the meditation, I had lots of sirens and train traffic at the bottom of the garden. So when I was like hearing or a sound, the train would still be going, and I found it hard to let go. So I was following it to the end, giving it my full attention, and then and also to I was doing that with physical pain. I've got a little bit of back pain at the moment. So when I said a feeling and tried to let go, well, the pain was going, no, I'm here, I'm still here. So I kind of focused on it, found it dissipated. So if it's not leading, I suppose my question is not leading onto a thought process, is it the same thing then, just following it to the end or focusing on it?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking of good old traffic noise. One thing you learn sitting at 58 Eccleston Square is that traffic comes and goes. So you can certainly follow that, and that disappears. That's right. So I mean, whether I'm following it to its end or not, the sound has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And if you sit at the Buddhist Society pretty regularly, rather than following, that process through, you just notice hearing, back to the breath or whatever you're using, your meditation object. Pain, I don't know about pain. It is quite interesting, if that's the right word, if there's physical pain, just to notice its changing qualities. By the way, none of what I'm saying is kind of saying, inaction, that one shouldn't do anything about anything. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is this practice of just, slowing down a bit opens up opportunities which we might not have seen there before for doing something. There's always the automatic response, of course, and maybe that's okay, maybe it's less than okay. But if we don't have to behave automatically about, it can be pain, it can be what we put in our mouths, or it can be traffic. If we don't immediately, we don't have this knee-jerk reaction, then it just makes a bit of space for doing something. I'm certainly not sitting back and saying, don't do anything about pain. Certainly not saying that. Or it's like, I'm not saying anything like, don't put in double glazing if the street noise is driving us mad. I'm not saying anything like that at all. I'm saying it's like, rather than these instinctual reactions, which may not be the best, just pause. Just note thinking or hearing or smelling or tasting or the physical sensation. And then maybe that opens up other possibilities. I mean, I just think that this mindfulness practice, gives us a bit of freedom. That's the point. It really does. You just notice what's going on, but without attaching to it and responding to it so automatically. And that seems to make life easier, actually. You just got to try it and see. I mean, that's why I keep on doing this. So any other thoughts? So I mean, this week's homework, as I say, to continue observing our habits, really. It's like, oh, that's the way. We're programmed, is it? Okay, all right. And it's like, and I can see how it could help. I read a novel just the other day, and it's not the best book in the world, so I'm not going to recommend the book. But I mean, it's a situation in which, for whatever reason, some poor person really sees themselves, or preoccupied about how other people think of them, to the point where they become completely clinically paranoid, and it's like you can just sort of experiment ourselves with how, you sort of encounter somebody we know, or a stranger, and just notice that immediate kind of response. There again, because I live out in the sticks, out of London, going into London was often a very interesting experience from the point of view of mindfulness practice. Because you get on the tube, and it's like you go to the Buddhist Society, there's all these lovely Buddhists around. Get on the tube, kind of all of human, subhuman life is there, right? And you just watch your mind reacting to it. I mean, I remember back, I get on the tube, and there's somebody in loads of leather studs with that sort of last of the Mohicans haircut. I mean, wow, just watch your mind reacting in that sort of situation. He's probably a lovely guy. Probably a lovely guy. But you just notice these reactions. Oh, that's the way it is. And one's not, you're not feeding the habit. You're not feeding the habit. Any other questions or comments? Nobody sent any chat through, but that's all really good. I don't mind that. Got any more thoughts? I mean, thank you, by the way, for all the comments and the contribution. I mean, that's really good. And oh, that dog is so lovely, Jeff. Yeah, that's very good. Okay. Bring him along next week. Okay. Any other comments or questions or whatever? Oh, well, I hope everybody has a good week, a happy week, as good as can be expected. At any rate, as good as conditions allow. You ask the monastics, how's life? And they say, good enough. It's good enough. Well, maybe that's the best we can hope for, or a little bit better. But anyway, have a great week if you can. And if you can't, be mindful. Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. Thanks for coming.